I stepped out of the conference room and my heart sank the moment I realized my sketchbook was still inside. That brown leather-bound journal wasn't just filled with random drawings, every single page contained him. Arnold Hayes, my boss. The man I'd been secretly obsessing over for months. I'd sketched his sharp jawline, the way his eyes would narrow when he was deep in thought. That infuriating smirk he wore whenever someone dared to challenge him during meetings. Like some lovesick artist capturing his forbidden muse. I'd documented every detail, and now I'd left all that evidence behind. I ran back as fast as my legs could carry me, my pulse racing with each step. But when I pushed open those glass doors, he was already standing there with my sketchbook in his hands, slowly flipping through the pages like someone reading a private diary. The overhead lights cast shadows across his face, and I couldn't tell whether he was angry, amused, or feeling something else entirely. "This yours?" he asked without looking up, his voice calm but carrying that unmistakable authority that made everyone in the office straighten their backs. My throat went completely dry and I couldn't form a single coherent sentence. "Sir, that's actually," I stammered helplessly. "You're an artist?" He turned another page and finally looked up directly into my eyes. His gaze was so intense that I felt frozen in place, like a statue unable to move. I couldn't say anything because I had no explanation that would make sense. Should I tell him that yes, I sketch you every day when you're working in your office? That every small gesture you make fascinates me so much that I can't help myself? He flipped to another page where I'd drawn him standing by his office window with sunset light falling across his face. He paused on that sketch for several seconds, then closed the book. I thought maybe he'd fire me or call HR. But instead he just held the journal out toward me. "Keep better track of your things next time, Jerry," he said, and the casual way he used my first name made me even more nervous. "I understand the value of sketches. This kind of talent shouldn't go to waste." I grabbed the sketchbook and quickly headed for the exit, my face burning with embarrassment. But just as I reached the door, I heard his voice again. "By the way, do you work with colors too or just pencil?" I turned back to see him still standing there looking at me with an odd sort of curiosity on his face. "Mostly pencil, sir," I barely whispered. He nodded as if considering something. "I see. Colors add more depth to emotions, you know." It was such a simple statement, but it carried so much weight that I understood immediately. He hadn't just looked at the sketches, he'd felt what was behind every line. And now everything had fundamentally changed between us. The walk back to my desk felt surreal. Like I was moving through a dream where nothing quite made sense. My hands were trembling as I shoved the sketchbook deep into my bag, as if hiding it now would somehow undo what had just happened. Ryan, my desk neighbor, glanced over with raised eyebrows but thankfully didn't ask questions. I sat down and stared blankly at my computer screen, unable to focus on anything except the fact that Arnold Hayes had seen everything. Every sketch. Every careful observation. Every moment I'd thought was private and safe. The afternoon dragged on painfully. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, analyzing every word he'd said, every expression on his face. He hadn't been angry, that much was clear. But what had he been? Curious? Flattered? Uncomfortable? The uncertainty was eating me alive. I found myself glancing toward his office every few minutes, half expecting him to call security, half hoping he'd call me instead. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, I packed up faster than I ever had before. I needed to get out of this building, away from the possibility of running into him again today. I needed space to think, to process what had happened and figure out what came next. But as I headed toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email from Arnold Hayes. My finger hovered over it for a solid 10 seconds before I found the courage to open it. The message was brief and professional. "Jerry, please see me first thing tomorrow morning regarding a new project opportunity. 9 a.m. sharp." That was it. Nothing about the sketchbook. Nothing about the drawings. Just a meeting request that could mean absolutely anything. I rode the elevator down in a daze, walked to my car in a fog, and drove home on autopilot. Once inside my apartment, I finally let myself collapse onto the couch and actually look at the sketchbook again. Page after page of Arnold's face stared back at me. Some sketches were quick studies done during boring meetings. Others were more detailed pieces I'd worked on at home, trying to capture the exact way light hit his features or how his expression shifted when he was concentrating. It was obsessive. There was no denying that. But it had also been my outlet, my way of dealing with feelings I could never act on. And now he'd seen it all. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him looking at those sketches, saw that unreadable expression on his face. Morning couldn't come fast enough, and yet I was terrified of what it would bring. When my alarm went off at 7, I'd already been awake for an hour. I showered, dressed in my best shirt and pants, and practiced what I might say. Apologies, explanations, justifications. I rehearsed them all. None of them felt adequate. The drive to the office felt like heading toward my own execution. I arrived early, grabbed a coffee I didn't really want, and sat at my desk watching the clock tick closer to 9. Ryan arrived and immediately noticed my state. "Dude, you look terrible. Everything okay?" "Just didn't sleep well," I muttered, which was at least partially true. "Important meeting today?" Something like that. At 8:55, I stood up and walked toward Arnold's office with legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. His assistant waved me through, and I knocked on his door even though it was already open. "Come in, Jerry. Close the door behind you." I did as instructed, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. Arnold was sitting at his desk, looking perfectly composed in his charcoal suit, and he gestured for me to take the seat across from him. This was it. Whatever was about to happen would define everything that came after. Arnold didn't speak right away. He just looked at me with those sharp, analytical eyes that had always made me nervous even before yesterday's disaster. The silence stretched between us like a rope pulled taut, and I fought the urge to fill it with rambling explanations. "Jerry, I want to talk to you about your skills," he finally said, leaning back in his chair. "Your artistic abilities, specifically." My stomach dropped, so we were going to address it directly. I gripped the armrests of my chair, preparing myself for whatever came next. "I've been thinking about our upcoming presentation for the Morrison account," he continued, and I blinked in confusion because this wasn't the direction I'd expected. "We need something that stands out. Something with visual impact that goes beyond standard corporate slides. And after seeing your work yesterday, I think you're exactly the person who can deliver that." "Wait. What?" "Sir, I'm not sure I follow." "I want you to lead the design aspect of the Morrison presentation," Arnold said clearly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You have 2 weeks. You'll report directly to me, and I want regular check-ins to ensure we're aligned on the creative direction." My mind was spinning. This wasn't a reprimand. This was an opportunity. A major one. But why? Was he testing me, throwing me a lifeline? Or did he genuinely think I could do this? "I appreciate the confidence, sir, but I'm primarily in data analysis. My design experience is limited to creating dozens of detailed, emotionally resonant portraits that demonstrate exceptional technical skill and artistic sensibility." Arnold interrupted, one eyebrow raised slightly. "Yes, I'm aware of your limitations, Jerry. I'm choosing to overlook them in favor of your obvious strengths." Heat flooded my face. He'd really studied those sketches that carefully, analyzed them professionally rather than just being weirded out by them. The Morrison project could be career-defining for whoever handles it successfully. He added, his voice softer now, "I think you're ready for that step. Unless you disagree?" "No, sir. I mean, yes, sir. I took a breath. I'll do it. Thank you for the opportunity." "Good. I'll have the project file sent to you within the hour. Plan to meet with me tomorrow morning to discuss your initial concepts." He paused, then added almost casually, "And Jerry, consider expanding your medium. Pencil sketches are excellent for capturing raw emotion, but color can convey things that monochrome simply cannot." There it was again. That reference to my work, delivered in a way that made it sound like professional advice rather than personal commentary. But we both knew it was personal. How could it not? I left his office in a daze, clutching the project brief he'd handed me. Ryan intercepted me before I reached my desk. "Well, did you get fired or promoted?" "Promoted, I think," I said uncertainly. "He wants me to lead the Morrison presentation design." Ryan's eyes widened. "That's huge. Jerry, that project has serious visibility. If you nail it, you're looking at a major career boost." "Yeah." I agreed, though my thoughts were elsewhere. Arnold had deliberately given me this assignment. After seeing my sketchbook, after knowing exactly how I felt about him, either he was incredibly professional about separating personal from business, or something else was happening here. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I dove into the project files, studying Morrison's brand identity, their market position, their aesthetic preferences, but every time I tried to conceptualize designs, my mind kept drifting back to Arnold. The way he'd looked at me this morning, the careful neutrality of his tone that somehow felt more loaded than if he'd been openly emotional. Late that afternoon, long after most people had left for the day, I was still at my desk with design samples spread across my workspace. I'd pulled out my sketchbook not to draw Arnold this time, but to experiment with the color techniques he'd mentioned, watercolors over pencil sketches, adding depth and warmth to previously flat images. Working late, I jerked in my seat, heart leaping into my throat. Arnold stood beside my cubicle, his suit jacket draped over one arm, tie loosened slightly. He looked different like this. Less CEO, more human, just exploring some concepts for tomorrow's meeting. I managed to say, resisting the urge to cover my work with my hands like a kid hiding a test score. He stepped closer, looking at the samples I'd created. His cologne reached me, sandalwood and something crisp, exactly as I'd always imagined during those moments I'd spent memorizing his features for my sketches. "These are excellent," he said quietly. "You've captured the balance between professional polish and creative energy. Morrison will respond well to this approach." "Thank you, sir. I'm trying to understand what appeals to you. I mean, what would appeal to the client in terms of visual storytelling?" Arnold's lips quirked slightly at my fumbled correction. "My preferences and the client's align fairly closely in this case. I value clean lines with unexpected touches of warmth. A minimalism that doesn't feel cold." He was describing his own aesthetic, but also, I realized with a jolt, he was describing what I'd tried to capture in my sketches of him. The precise exterior hiding something warmer underneath. "I'll keep that in mind," I said carefully. "See that you do." He straightened up, moving back slightly, but still standing closer than any boss probably should. "Jerry, I want to be clear about something. This project is legitimate. I'm not offering you special treatment or setting you up for failure. I genuinely believe you can excel at this. Your personal interests don't factor into my professional judgment." The way he said personal interests made my mouth go dry. So we were acknowledging it, sort of, dancing around it with corporate language, but definitely acknowledging it. "I understand, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't." He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then turned to leave. But at the edge of my cubicle, he paused. "One more thing. Tomorrow morning, bring coffee. The good stuff from that place on 5th Street. Not the office sludge. Black, 2 sugars. Consider it part of your research into client preferences." Was Arnold Hayes asking me to bring him coffee? Like it was some kind of test, or maybe an excuse for something else? "Of course, sir. 5th Street. Black, 2 sugars." He nodded and walked away, leaving me sitting there wondering what the hell was happening. This felt like more than just a professional mentorship. The tension between us was palpable, electric, dangerous, and somehow, instead of backing away from it, Arnold seemed to be leaning into it. I gathered my things and headed home, my mind racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. Tomorrow's meeting suddenly felt less like a project discussion and more like something else entirely. Something that excited and terrified me in ways I wasn't ready to examine too closely. I arrived at the 5th Street coffee shop at 8:30 the next morning, giving myself plenty of time before my 9 o'clock meeting with Arnold. The barista recognized me as a regular and smiled when I ordered 2 drinks. My usual cappuccino and Arnold's specific request, black coffee, 2 sugars. I'd memorized it like it was vital information, which in a way it was. Walking into the office building with those 2 cups felt strangely intimate, like I was crossing some invisible line between professional and personal. Several colleagues noticed and gave me curious looks as I headed toward the executive floor, but I kept my expression neutral, pretending this was perfectly normal. Arnold's assistant smiled knowingly when she saw me. "He's expecting you? Go right in." I balanced the laptop bag on my shoulder while carefully holding both coffee cups, then pushed open Arnold's office door with my elbow. He looked up from his computer, and something flickered across his face when he saw the coffee. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. You remembered, he said simply. You were pretty specific about the order. Most people would have just grabbed whatever was convenient. He took the cup I offered, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact lasted maybe half a second, but I felt it everywhere. I settled into the chair across from him and pulled out my laptop, launching into my presentation of initial concepts. For the next 20 minutes, I walked him through various approaches to the Morrison project, color schemes, layout options, ways to integrate their brand identity with fresh creative elements. Arnold listened intently, asking sharp questions that challenged my thinking in productive ways. He was brilliant like this. Engaged, focused, pushing me to elevate my ideas without crushing them. I found myself relaxing slightly, falling into the rhythm of creative collaboration. This direction, he said, pointing to one of my more ambitious concepts, this is what we need. It's bold without being reckless. Sophisticated but not stuffy. Can you develop this further? Absolutely. I'll have refined mock-ups ready by Friday. Good. He sat back, taking a sip of his coffee. You're handling this well, Jerry. The pressure, the tight timeline. Not everyone would rise to the occasion. I don't want to waste the opportunity you've given me. Something shifted in his expression. Is that why you're doing this? Because I gave you an opportunity? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Are you working this hard because you're genuinely invested in the project? Or because you're trying to prove something? To me specifically, my hands stilled on my laptop keyboard. This conversation was veering away from professional territory fast. I'm working hard because both things are true. The project matters. And yes, what you think of me matters too. Why? The single word hung in the air between us like a challenge. We both knew why. We'd been dancing around it since he'd found my sketchbook, using professional language to mask personal truth. But apparently Arnold was done dancing. You know why? I said quietly. I want to hear you say it. His voice was low, intense in a way I'd never heard before. Because there's a difference between what I saw in those drawings and what you're willing to admit out loud. And I need to know which one is real. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. This was it. The moment where everything either fell apart or became something else entirely. I could retreat into professionalism, laugh it off as artistic practice, protect myself with plausible deniability, or I could be honest. I chose honesty. I've been watching you for months, I admitted, meeting his eyes even though it felt like exposing myself completely. Every meeting, every presentation, every moment I could observe without being obvious about it. You fascinate me, Arnold. Not just how you look, but how your mind works, the way you solve problems, how you command a room without raising your voice. I started sketching you because it was the only way I could process what I was feeling without acting on it inappropriately. He didn't speak, just watched me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. I know it's completely unprofessional, I continued, the words spilling out now that I'd started. I know there are power dynamics and workplace ethics, and a dozen reasons why any of this is a terrible idea. But you asked for the truth, so here it is. Those drawings weren't just art practice. They were me trying to understand someone who seemed impossible to figure out. Someone who probably shouldn't matter to me as much as he does. The silence that followed my confession felt endless. Arnold set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision, then stood up from his desk. For a horrible moment I thought he was going to ask me to leave, to take my feelings and my inappropriate artwork and find employment elsewhere. Instead, he walked to his office door and locked it. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet room and I stopped breathing entirely. Do you know what I saw when I looked at your sketchbook? Arnold asked, turning back to face me. He moved closer, stopping just at the edge of my personal space. I saw someone who pays attention, who notices details most people miss, who sees beyond the surface of things. He crouched down so we were at eye level, and suddenly the professional distance between CEO and employee evaporated completely. I saw someone who looked at me the way I've been trying not to look at him. Arnold continued, his voice barely above a whisper now. Because you're right about power dynamics and workplace ethics. You're right about all the reasons this is complicated. But I stopped being your boss the moment you walked out of that conference room yesterday. What do you mean? I mean, I've already drafted a transfer request, he said. Effective immediately, you'll be reporting to Sarah Chen instead of me. The Morrison project continues under my guidance, but officially I will no longer have any supervisory authority over your employment. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You're removing yourself from my chain of command? I'm removing the ethical barrier, Arnold corrected. Because I need to know if what I'm about to do is something you actually want or if you'd only be responding because I'm your boss. So tell me, Jerry, without any professional obligation or career pressure factoring into your answer, do you want this? Do you want me? His face was inches from mine. I could count his eyelashes, see the exact shade of brown in his eyes that I'd tried so many times to capture with pencil but never quite managed. Yes, I breathed. I want this. I want Then meet me tonight, Arnold said, standing up and offering me his hand to help me rise. 8 o'clock. There's a restaurant called Marcello's on the north side. Quiet, private, where no one from the office goes. We'll talk. Really talk, without all the corporate complications hanging over us. I took his hand and let him pull me up, our faces now level with each other. This is really happening? Only if you show up tonight. He released my hand slowly, professionally, but his eyes held promises that had nothing to do with business. The choice is entirely yours, Jerry. No pressure, no expectations, just an invitation to see where this might go. I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. Arnold moved back to his desk, seamlessly transitioning back into professional mode, and began discussing timeline details for the Morrison project as if the last few minutes hadn't just turned my world upside down. When I finally left his office 20 minutes later, my mind was reeling. In less than 24 hours, everything had changed. My boss had become something else. My secret feelings had become a mutual confession. And tonight, I had a date with Arnold Hayes. A real date. With no sketchbook between us, just two people figuring out if what they felt on paper could translate into something real. Marcello's turned out to be everything Arnold had promised. Intimate without being claustrophobic. Elegant without pretension. Soft lighting from Edison bulbs created pools of warmth throughout the space, and the quiet murmur of other diners provided just enough ambient noise to feel private. I arrived 5 minutes early, my nerves making it impossible to time things perfectly, and found Arnold already seated at a corner table studying the wine list. He'd traded his usual executive armor for dark jeans and a fitted navy Henley that made him look younger, more accessible. When he glanced up and saw me approaching, something unguarded flashed across his face before he schooled it back into that slight smile I'd sketched so many times. "You found it easily enough?" he asked as I slid into the seat across from him. "Your directions were precise." "Very you." The words came out more flirtatious than I'd intended. But Arnold's smile widened slightly, so maybe that wasn't a bad thing. "I've been accused of being overly detailed before," he admitted, setting aside the wine list. Though usually not as a compliment. A waiter appeared to take our drink orders. Arnold requested a specific Italian red that meant nothing to me, but the sommelier's approving nod suggested he knew his wines. When the waiter turned to me expectantly, I panicked slightly and said I'd have the same, earning an amused look from Arnold. "Not a wine drinker?" "Not an expensive wine drinker," I corrected. "My usual budget tops out at whatever's on sale at the corner store." "Then let's consider this an education." There was no condescension in his tone, just genuine warmth. "Though I should warn you, once you develop a taste for good wine, going back to the cheap stuff becomes difficult. Speaking from experience, my father was a mechanic who drank beer from cans," Arnold said, leaning back as the waiter returned with our wine. "I worked my way through business school doing inventory at a warehouse. The expensive tastes came later, after I'd already learned to appreciate the simple things." This was new information. In all my months of observation, I'd never heard Arnold mention his background. He carried himself with such natural authority that I'd assumed privilege, private schools, connections. Learning otherwise made him somehow more real. "I wouldn't have guessed that," I admitted after the waiter left with our dinner orders. "Most people don't. I've gotten good at fitting into spaces where I wasn't originally meant to belong." His fingers traced the stem of his wine glass absently. It's a useful skill in business, but exhausting in personal life. Always calculating what to reveal, what to hide, what version of yourself will be most acceptable. The vulnerability in that statement made my chest tight. Is that why you chose this restaurant? So you could stop calculating? Partially. Also because the gnocchi here is exceptional. His lips quirked. But yes, Jerry, I'm tired of performing. I spent all day every day managing perceptions and playing corporate chess. I don't want to do that with you. Then don't, I said simply. I've already seen your worst, or what you probably think is your worst. A junior employee obsessively documenting your every move like some kind of stalker. If you can handle that level of mortifying, I think we can handle honesty. Arnold's laugh was unexpected and genuine, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. When you put it that way, my baggage seems manageable by comparison. Our food arrived and the conversation shifted into easier territory. Arnold asked about my art background, so I told him about taking every elective drawing class my high school offered, about the scholarship I'd turned down to art school because the debt seemed insurmountable, about how I'd convinced myself that creativity could be a hobby while I pursued something more practical. Do you regret it? Arnold asked, watching me with those sharp, assessing eyes. Choosing practical over passion? Some days. Then I remember I like being able to pay rent. I paused, considering, though lately I've been wondering if that's just the excuse I tell myself. Maybe I was scared of failing at the thing I loved most. Fear of failure is paralytic, Arnold agreed. I see it constantly in business. People so afraid of making the wrong move that they make no move at all. But here's what I've learned. You can recover from failure. You can't recover from never trying. Is that your subtle way of encouraging my artistic aspirations? It's my direct way of saying you have genuine talent that deserves development, whether that's as a career or serious hobby. He set down his fork, his expression intent. Those sketches weren't just technically proficient. They had emotion, depth, observation that goes beyond surface detail. That's not something you can teach. Either you see the world that way or you don't. Heat crept up my neck at the praise. You really studied them that carefully? I stayed up until 2 in the morning looking at them. Arnold admitted, trying to see myself through your eyes. Wondering what you saw that made me worth documenting so thoroughly. The confession stunned me into silence. He'd lost sleep over my sketches, over trying to understand my perspective. What did you conclude? I finally managed. That either you're exceptionally generous in your interpretations, or I'm better at hiding my flaws than I realized. His smile was self-deprecating. Possibly both. Or possibly you're harder on yourself than anyone else would be, I countered. Every time I tried to sketch you, I kept noticing these moments when you thought no one was watching and your expression would soften, or when someone on the team did good work and you'd get this satisfied look before you composed yourself back into CEO mode. You're more than the armor you wear, Arnold. I just happened to be paying enough attention to notice. Something shifted in his expression, became more open. No one's ever said anything like that to me before. Maybe no one's been paying attention the right way. The rest of dinner passed in a comfortable flow of conversation that ranged from serious to playful and back again. Arnold told me about his failed engagement 5 years ago, about how his ex-fiancée had ultimately chosen someone whose ambitions didn't consume quite so much oxygen in the relationship. I talked about my family's confusion over my career choices, about being the first in 3 generations to finish college and feeling caught between 2 worlds as a result. When the check came, Arnold handled it smoothly despite my half-hearted attempt to split it. Consider it compensation for all the times I've kept you late working on presentations, he said with a slight smile. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear. Arnold had parked a few blocks away, and we walked slowly, neither of us quite ready for the evening to end. So what happens now? I asked as we reached his car, a sleek charcoal sedan that suited him perfectly. Arnold turned to face me fully, his expression serious. Now we see if what we have in these private moments can exist in the real world. We take it slow. We're discreet where we need to be. And we figure out how to navigate the complicated parts together. That sounds reasonable and mature, I said. Also terrifying. Welcome to adult relationships. But his smile softened the words. Jerry, I can't promise this will be easy. People will notice eventually, and some of them won't be kind about it. But I can promise I'm in this for real. Not as an experiment or a distraction. If we're doing this, I'm all in. I stepped closer, emboldened by wine and honesty and the way he was looking at me like I was something precious. Then we're doing this. Arnold's hand came up to cup my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. Good. Because I've spent the last 48 hours trying to convince myself this was a terrible idea and failing spectacularly. When he kissed me, it was nothing like I'd imagined during all those months of secret observation. It was better, softer, and more deliberate. Like he was memorizing the moment. Like this mattered as much to him as it did to me. We broke apart slowly, and Arnold rested his forehead against mine. Fair warning. I'm going to want to do that again, frequently. I laughed, giddy and overwhelmed. I think I can accommodate that request. 3 weeks into whatever Arnold and I were building together, and I was starting to believe we might actually pull this off. We'd fallen into a rhythm, professional and distant at work. Intimate and genuine everywhere else. Late dinners at restaurants far from the office. Weekend mornings at his apartment where I'd sketch while he worked through emails. Both of us content in comfortable silence. Wednesday evenings at a small gallery downtown where Arnold was teaching me to appreciate modern art the way he'd taught me about wine. The Morrison presentation had launched to universal acclaim, and my role in its success had earned me credibility that felt genuinely deserved rather than gifted. Sarah Chen, my new supervisor after Arnold's strategic reorganization, had started assigning me increasingly complex projects. Life felt almost surreally good. Then Blake Williams decided to ruin everything. It started small. Pointed comments about my workload during team meetings. Questions about why I spent so much time in closed-door sessions with executives. Casual observations about preferential treatment that he delivered with a smile but weighted with implication. You need to watch out for that guy. Ryan warned me over lunch one Friday. Blake's been passed over for promotion twice. He's looking for someone to blame, and you're making yourself an easy target. I'm just doing my job, I protested, though unease was settling in my stomach. Yeah, but you're doing it well, and that threatens him. Just be careful, okay? Office politics can get ugly fast. I should have taken Ryan's warning more seriously. Instead, I focused on my work and my secret evenings with Arnold, convinced that competence would speak for itself. The colored portrait I'd created of Arnold hung in his home office now, and he'd started buying art supplies for me to keep at his place. We hadn't defined what we were. Boyfriends felt too casual. Partners too formal. But whatever it was felt solid, real, worth protecting. I've been thinking, Arnold said one evening as we cooked dinner together in his kitchen. He was chopping vegetables with the same precise focus he brought to everything, while I attempted to follow a pasta recipe that seemed deceptively simple on paper. Dangerous habit, I teased. About going public. With us. He set down his knife and turned to face me. Not making some grand announcement, but stopping the active concealment. Let people see us together outside work. Deal with whatever commentary comes rather than hiding. My hands stilled over the pot I was stirring. What brought this on? I'm tired of compartmentalizing my life. Arnold said honestly, tired of calculating every interaction in case someone's watching. I want to take you to actual restaurants instead of places chosen primarily for their lack of colleagues. I want to not panic every time someone from the office walks past us on the street. The HR implications are minimal now that I'm not your supervisor, he interrupted. Yes. People will talk. Some will be unkind about it. But Jerry, we're not doing anything wrong. We're two consenting adults in a relationship. The corporate pearl-clutching about optics and appearances is exhausting, and I'm ready to stop caring about it. I wanted that too. Desperately. But Blake's increasing hostility made me nervous about drawing more attention. Can we think about it? Not because I don't want it, just the timing feels complicated. Arnold studied my face, then nodded slowly. What's going on? You've been tense this week. So I told him about Blake. About the comments and implications, about Ryan's warnings. Arnold's expression darkened as I talked. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid by transferring your reporting structure, he said. Frustration evident. But office politics don't care about technical org charts. It's fine. I can handle Blake. You shouldn't have to handle Blake. His insecurity about his own career stagnation isn't your problem to manage. Arnold pulled me close, his arms solid around me. But you're right that going public now might throw fuel on that particular fire. We'll wait. Be strategic about timing. Except Blake didn't wait. The company's annual gala fell 2 weeks later. A black tie affair at a downtown hotel ballroom where attendance was mandatory but bringing dates was optional. Arnold would be there schmoozing clients and major stakeholders. I'd be there trying to network and look professionally engaged. We wouldn't arrive together, wouldn't sit together, would barely acknowledge each other beyond polite professional courtesy. It seemed manageable. I should have known better. The evening started well enough. I wore the one good suit I owned, freshly dry cleaned for the occasion. Ryan and I claimed a table with some other junior staff and made appropriate small talk while picking at overpriced chicken. Across the ballroom, Arnold worked the room in his element, and I allowed myself one indulgent moment of just watching him. Confident, charismatic, completely magnetic. Then I noticed Blake at the bar, drinking steadily and watching me with an expression I didn't like. When he started weaving through tables toward me, Ryan tensed beside me. "Here we go," Ryan muttered. "Remember, don't engage. Just let him make an idiot of himself." But Blake wasn't interested in subtle tonight. He was interested in an audience. "Jerry," he announced loudly enough that nearby conversations paused. "The golden boy himself. Tell me, how does it feel being the teacher's pet?" "Blake, you're drunk. Maybe sit down and have some water," I said evenly, trying to diffuse the situation. "Oh, I'm drunk. Definitely drunk. But that doesn't make me wrong." He swayed slightly, his voice carrying. "Everyone's wondering how you went from data analyst to executive pet project in 3 months. I figured it out though. Special talents, right? The kind you don't put on a resume?" The implications were clear and ugly. People were definitely watching now. Conversations stopping as attention focused on our table. My face felt hot, but I kept my voice level. "You're making assumptions based on nothing. My work speaks for itself. Does it? Or does Hayes speak for it?" Blake's smile was vicious. "Must be nice, sleeping your way into opportunities the rest of us actually have to earn." "That's enough." Arnold's voice cut through the ballroom like ice, and suddenly he was there, positioned between Blake and our table. His expression was glacial. Every inch the CEO who could fire someone with a sentence. "You're making a scene, Williams. Security will escort you out. We'll discuss your employment status Monday morning." Blake's face went pale as security materialized, seemingly from nowhere. "Sir, I was just slandering a colleague and creating a hostile work environment," Arnold finished. "Yes, I noticed. Leave. Now." As security guided a protesting Blake toward the exit, the damage crystallized around us. Everyone had heard enough to speculate, seen enough to draw conclusions. Arnold standing up for me so forcefully had basically confirmed whatever relationship Blake had been implying. Arnold turned to me, something apologetic and determined in his expression. "My office. 5 minutes. We need to talk about damage control." Then he walked away, leaving me sitting in the wreckage of our careful discretion while whispers erupted around me. I found Arnold in a service corridor adjacent to the hotel kitchen, away from guests and gossip. He'd loosened his bow tie and run his hands through his hair enough times to destroy its careful styling. When he saw me, something in his rigid posture relaxed slightly. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I should have handled that more diplomatically, but hearing him talk about you that way—" "You defended me," I interrupted. "In front of everyone. You basically announced that Blake was right about us being involved." "I know. I compromised our discretion because I couldn't stomach letting him tear you down publicly." Arnold's jaw was tight. "Margaret from HR has already cornered me for a private meeting Monday morning. She's going to investigate whether any policies were violated, whether your promotions and projects were merit-based or influenced by personal relationships." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "This is bad. It's manageable. We have documentation. Sarah Chen's been supervising you for weeks. Your work quality is demonstrable. The Morrison success stands on its own. But yes, this accelerates things in ways neither of us wanted." I leaned against the wall, processing. My career credibility was now under scrutiny. Arnold's professional judgment was being questioned. All because Blake Williams couldn't handle his own inadequacy and I'd been foolish enough to think we could keep this secret indefinitely. What if I resign? The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. Remove the conflict of interest entirely. You keep your position, your reputation stays intact, and I find another job where none of this matters. Arnold looked at me like I'd suggested something obscene. Absolutely not. You're not sacrificing your career because of office politics and gossip. But if it's my career or yours, then we find a third option, he said firmly, crossing to me. His hands framed my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. Jerry, I'm not letting you fall on this sword for me. We figure this out together or not at all. How? Margaret's investigation, Blake's accusations, everyone thinking I slept my way into opportunities I actually earned. How do we come back from this? By telling the truth. Arnold's thumb brushed my cheekbone, a gesture so familiar now it made my chest ache. We went about this wrong, trying to hide instead of being upfront. Monday morning, before Margaret can build a narrative, we'll request a meeting. We'll explain the timeline that you were never under my direct supervision during our relationship, that all your projects and promotions were vetted by Sarah Chan and other department heads, that we've been careful about separation of professional and personal spheres. Will that be enough? Truthfully, I don't know, but it's better than letting speculation fill the gaps. He dropped his hands, stepping back slightly. There's something else. That offer I mentioned from Barrett Consulting last year. I've been in informal discussions with them again. They're interested in me heading up their West Coast expansion. My heart stuttered. You're leaving the company? I'm considering it, not because of this situation specifically, but because priorities shift. Arnold's expression was intense, unguarded in a way I rarely saw. When I found your sketchbook, when I saw how you'd observed me so carefully, it made me realize how much of my life I'd been spending performing rather than living. I've built this successful career, achieved everything I thought I wanted, and somehow missed the parts that actually matter. Arnold, let me finish, he said gently. You asked me once what happens if this doesn't work, if we can't navigate the complications, and I realized I don't have a good answer for that because walking away isn't something I'm willing to consider. You've become the person I call when something good happens. The one I want to tell about client victories or annoying meetings or random thoughts that occur to me at 3 in the morning. You've become essential, Jerry, and that matters more than any job title. Tears were threatening, which was ridiculous because we were hiding in a service corridor at a corporate gala and this was possibly the worst timing for emotional confessions. But Arnold wasn't finished. So here's what I'm proposing. We handle Monday's meeting honestly. We deal with whatever fallout comes from tonight, and then we seriously evaluate whether I transition to Barrett Consulting, which removes all the corporate relationship complications and lets us move forward without this constant calculation. You'd leave your dream position. For me, it stopped being my dream position the moment I realized it was preventing me from having the life I actually want. Arnold pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. Besides, Barrett's offer is genuinely exciting. New challenges, better work-life balance, equity stake instead of just salary. I've been looking for an excuse to seriously consider it. You're just the excuse that finally matters. I couldn't find words adequate for what I was feeling, so I just held on to him, breathing in his familiar scent and trying to memorize this moment. We should go back inside, I finally said. People will notice we're both missing. Let them notice. I'm done hiding. Arnold pulled back enough to meet my eyes. We'll go back in there together. We'll deal with the whispers and speculation. And Monday we'll start building something sustainable instead of this exhausting balancing act. When we returned to the ballroom, conversations definitely paused as people tracked our entrance. Ryan caught my eye from across the room and gave a subtle thumbs up. A few colleagues looked away uncomfortably. Margaret from HR was deep in conversation with another executive, probably already strategizing Monday's interrogation. But Arnold walked beside me, not touching but present in a way that made his support clear. When we reached the bar, he ordered 2 drinks and handed me one with a slight smile. To honesty, he proposed quietly, raising his glass. To figuring it out together, I countered, clinking my glass against his. Whatever happened Monday, whatever investigation Margaret conducted or gossip circulated or career implications materialized, we'd handle it. Not perfectly, probably not easily, but honestly and together. Looking at Arnold, at the man I'd spent months secretly documenting, trying to understand from a distance, I realized I'd gotten it wrong in those sketches. I'd captured the surface, the professional persona, the controlled exterior, but the real Arnold Hayes was messier and more vulnerable, more passionate and less certain than my careful pencil lines had suggested. He was also exactly who I wanted beside me as we walked into whatever came next. The gala continued around us, but the anxious knot in my chest had loosened. We'd survived Blake's public accusation. We'd have our honest conversation with HR. And then we'd build something real, something that didn't require constant concealment or careful calculation. It wouldn't be easy, but then, nothing worth having ever was.